Hello, this is Dr. Moore. The particular lesson that I'll talk to you briefly about today is called self-facilitated conceptual learning. And it focuses on a premise of if you're able to understand how you intake information, if you have a process of testing it and can make it personal as you're learning it, then you can have a lot more confidence with it moving forward. So there's three different ways that you can intake information. You can intake it by memorization. So you may have a photographic memory or the ability to just memorize information as you're learning it. And then the second way is through pattern recognition. So that is looking at information that you've seen before and looking for patterns in that and being able to recall that and potentially replicate that. And then there's conceptualization, being able to understand the big picture and how information is interconnected. Now, when we're inputting information, I believe there's two different ways that we can do it. We can do that in an active way, where you're asking questions along the way. Do I trust this information? Where is it coming from? Right? That is an active process. And then there's a passive process where you may just believe the information that's being given to you. So the professor or instructor is giving information and you believe it. Now, after you intake that, it's then what do you do next? If you're learning it through an active process, you can ask questions and create your own logic and then integrate the information. Or you can learn information from someone else and then make it personal to you and integrate the information. Now, if it's in a passive way, you can either just memorize the information, or you can create your own logic with the information that you believe that someone has given to you. At the end of the day, the goal is two different things. The first thing is to take that information and make it personal to you, where you can have your own unique connections to it, right? So if someone is teaching you something, you want to be able to say, well, what does this mean to me? Right? How can I create my own analogy or metaphor so it's meaningful to me? And then the second thing is how do I take that new information and connect it to existing information, integrate it? Those are the two goals. And so your ability to be able to do that will definitely make your journey as a student of science a lot easier, and it also activates your mind in a way where it can reach its highest potential. All right, good luck. So we'll go ahead and start. So again, this workshop is on self-facilitated conceptual learning. Let me have Johnson, go ahead and read that quote for us real quick.
My most prudent course of action when someone is teaching me is to question and understand the perspective and foundation of what they are saying. This approach allows me to make a decision to believe them or not.
All right, so
Can I interrupt you? What page are we on?
We're on page 16.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so what do you think I'm saying in that quote?
I think you're saying it's important when someone is teaching me something to always kind of see why they're teaching you this and hope from their perspective what they gain from teaching you this, and what you'll gain from what they're teaching, and from that you can kind of see whether this is something that this is advice that you'll take. For example, like if someone, you wouldn't want to take advice from someone that you don't want, like you wouldn't want the life that they have, right?
Okay. All right. So when I talk about perspective, I've talked about how when you engage life from where you're at, from your life experiences, it's your perception, right? That's how you're perceiving life. But you have to move outside of yourself to understand someone else's perspective. Like that's a skill. And in this society, a lot of times people are living in their perception and social media and everything that they're receiving is reinforcing that perception. Now, it may not be reality, but it may be something that they want to be reality, so then they're stuck in their perception and they don't want to understand anybody else's perspective, right? But what I'm saying in the statement right here is that I want to understand the perspective of the person who's trying to teach me something, who's trying to explain something. Because in that moment, I'm trying to make the decision, should I be listening to you and believing anything you say or not? And do you have any hidden biases or prejudices that is tainting your perspective? I want to know that. So that's kind of the muscle that you want to get used to, and you get a chance to do that when you study with other people and you have people in your study group that have a different perspective than you, a different approach of how they tackle their math and science problems, right? And then if you move outside of yourself and be like, so Ronan, like, so why'd you do this step for? You know, this step actually skipped 2 steps. And I'm like, damn, I like that. But I'm only going to be able to learn that if I even care about understanding someone else's perspective instead of staying in my perception or my way or my approach of doing things. Does that make sense? All right. So basically, there's 3 different ways that we talk about, or that this lesson talks about, of how we intake information. And so the first is memorization. So you can imagine back when you were maybe 4 or 5 years old and you were trying to learn the ABCs, you know, you were singing a song, you know, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever that was, you were memorizing something through, in that case, a song, and then that was the way that you were taking in new information. But the second way is through pattern recognition. And I would also argue that there's 2 different levels of pattern recognition. There's one where, you know, you just do a bunch of problems and you can see the pattern and you're just manipulating stuff, right? And sometimes people do that in math, and that's not a bad way to intake information and learn. Because sometimes when you first learn math, you just got to do 50 problems of a certain thing and you're like, okay, I got it now. But a higher level of pattern recognition is when you are able to conceptually connect 2 things that seem unrelated because you see a pattern or similarity in that. And I would actually argue that that's leaning more towards conceptualization. But it still is a gift to see random things that seem unrelated and see a pattern in that. Does that make sense? And then there's conceptualization. And the conceptualization part is, how do you understand concepts? How do you then own those concepts? How do you personalize those concepts? How do you learn how to master those concepts? Because in my mind, and as a student of science, understanding concepts and integrating new information to previous information is critical, right? Because you're always going to be learning new stuff. Period, right? For your generation, you know, you're going to have discoveries happening every day in an exponential way moving forward, and you're going to have to be like, okay, well, this is new. How do I go back in my mind and think about the things that I thought I knew about this and maybe self-correct or integrate that with what I thought I knew or what I believe I still know, and does it still make sense to me? Then you're able to really create with those concepts and that information. And that's what we're all, you know, looking to do as students of science, right? Right now you're at that stage of, I want to learn information that someone else has discovered already before. I want to prove to this professor that I understand this and I can problem solve with it by doing well on this exam. But at some point, those exams aren't going to matter anymore. And it's going to be like, okay, I have a job. I'm trying to research this. I'm trying to discover this. How do I take that information that I have in my mind, and then how do I then create with it, right? Like, that's the power that we have. as humans. But it's an extra step that sometimes we don't learn in school, but we kind of have to learn it along the way through the maturation process of doing well on these science and math courses. And how well you do it, in my mind, is going to be an eternal thing. It's going to be you being able to master your inner world. So when I say inner world, I mean anything that you take in is going into your mental workspace inside your mind. Hopefully you're organizing it in a way that you can retrieve it. Either you're putting it on the shelf, either you're putting an asterisk next to it, whatever it is in your inner world, you're trying to create this inner world where this information is and make it personal to you. And then whatever that relationship is to the information and concepts that you know, it only has to make sense to you as long as the relationship is accurate. Right? Like, as long as the relationship is accurate, then you're off to the races, and you can pull that concept 5 years from now or 10 years from now and be like, I got this. But if that relationship is not accurate, then you're stuck, right? So, really quick story, right? When I was, at one point, I was applying to become a White House fellow. Some people may have heard this story before, but there's White House interns and there's White House fellows, and a White House fellow is this super duper competitive competition where you have thousands of people across the nation that are applying, and then it gets whittled down to 12 people, and they get paid a 6-figure salary, and you get a chance to work under the heads of the government organizations in the US government. So I made it past the first round, so I made it, 90% of the people don't make it past the first round, and they have 8 sites around the country with 12 people there, and those 12 people have to interview over the course of a couple days, and then they send 3 forward to Washington, D.C., and they interview with senators, congresspeople, and all those things, and then they select 12, right? So anyway, all that to say is that they had a group activity during the lunch period where all 12 people are like ballers. Right, you didn't get there because you're a punk, right? Like, you had fighter pilots there, you had lawyers there, you had people from the CIA, you just had people who were like, you didn't get to that round unless you were like, about to do something, right? But in my mind, I'm like, I don't care because I'm going in, right? Like, whatever's in front of me, I'm going in. So anyway, during that lunch period, they had this exercise where they say, Town X has lead poisoning in their water. You find out at 6 p.m. that Town X has lead poisoning in their water. One of the cures for lead poisoning is chlorine, but there's a shortage of chlorine. You have one person needs to take the lead. You have 6 minutes to find a way to communicate this to the town in a way that allows them to be safe. You have another 6 minutes to find a solution. One person needs to be the scribe. Go. Right? So you can't play defense, because if you aren't popping in there, all the judges are sitting around there looking at you, then you're going to be stuck. Everyone's probably an alpha in the room, so if you take the lead, you're going to have to make sure you herd some cats so they all follow you in a way that's cool, right? So in my mind, again, I have to go back to I got to get myself hyped. Right? I'm like, who are you, Fred? Who the hell you are? I'm like, you're a scientist. That's what you do. I'm like, so I'm getting myself hyped up, right? And I'm like, this is what we do. And so I went back and I was like, every person in their house has table salt. Table salt is made out of sodium and chlorine. I said, what we can do is create an ionic filter. We can create a filter that basically has negative charges. The negative charges will bind to the sodium, and the chlorine will filter through, and it will participate out the lead out of the water. And they're looking at me, and I'm like, who the hell are you? I'm like, I'm a scientist, that's what the hell I do, right? I'm like, are you talking about MacGyver? I was like, no. But if you want me, we're wasting time right now. I can draw you the valence structure of lead and how this thing would bond, but let's go, right? So I took chemistry 20 years ago. But however it entered my mind under pressure, I could integrate that, because if you took anything that's like super duper conceptually complex. But that's what I mean by you have to own what you're learning. You feel me? But I'm like, hey, let's go. Talk to me, y'all. What you guys thinking? Before we head off. No thoughts, no comments, people in virtual land? Go ahead.
I really like that. I want to add something I think that might be a cool little bit to ponder. On level one, you mentioned memorization in terms of learning as a kid the ABC song. Well, I mean, in a sense, that is also creating an association. In the kind of goes down through the whole thing. You mentioned like creating an association. It has to be correctly associated. So now if I hear the ABC song, I know my ABCs. If I'm going alphabetical order, I'm trying to alphabetize something, I sing the ABC song in my head. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
So I just think that's a really interesting thing I wanted to add in there.
So, like along with that, you know, when you're learning a new concept, I really believe the power is when you're able to create a metaphor or an analogy that's connected to that concept that means something to you. Like, and it could be anything. I've had students in my program that were taking Chemistry 101B and using basketball defensive schemes to think about how the molecules are acting with one another. And again, as long as the relationship is correct, it doesn't matter because that person can go back to that at some point and being like, yeah, it's this,
Well,
right?
that's
Right? And deliver on it. So it takes an extra step, and you have to be active to think about how can I create an analogy, a metaphor to this concept? And most people are going to be like, I understand the concept, I'm going to move on. Or I'm going to memorize this concept, and I'm going to memorize it the one way that this book explained it, or this instructor explained it, but that's not owning it, right? Like, and I've shared this before. If you're learning a word in Webster, and you use your photographic memory and the one example of what it meant for that word or definition in Webster, then that's all you know. And you're less likely to use it in a sentence, in a different sentence, because you haven't took the extra step to think about it. But if you learn that word in Webster, and you take that word and you say, let me create another sentence or two sentences use that word, oh, so it's like this, then you own that word in a way where you could use it in a conversation with somebody, right? But that's an extra step, and sometimes we don't feel like we have enough time, or we don't give it enough priority to do that. And what I'm saying is that, like, that's extremely important, period, moving forward. And you kind of want to do that with everything that you learn.
I feel like also, like, as humans, we only have so much space in our brains to remember exact things that we write down, have little whiteboards in our brains without actually creating association or using it. Because the fact of the matter is, like, no matter what you're doing, you got to use it or you lose it. Physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever, use it or lose it.
Well, it's not how much storage you have, because, you know, we now know that our DNA can store, like a small amount, can store way more than computer chips. But it's how do you move it from the short-term memory to the long-term memory? And that association and that meaning, in my mind, is critical. Some people have pathways that are over-phosphorylated or whatever in a way that allow them to do that a lot easier. But yes, you know, being kinesthetic and using your five senses, because making it hands-on, definitely is a way to get that pathway more solidified than others. All right, go ahead. Okay, 1 second.
So one of the big things that I had to learn from your Well Health story was that you gotta have a level of self-confidence, and that can be said in your Well Health story, like how you hype yourself up. The same could be said as when you're in a test, and that could be in the form of like mastering your learning and like really getting a good conceptualization of what you're learning about. Because when you're in a test, you don't want to have like that doubt, and that doubt can really cloud your judgment or cloud your thought process.
Yeah, No, I mean, some people may take that hyping yourself up as being arrogant or overconfident, but, at the end of the day, whatever you're learning, whatever you believe you know, it's just you taking that exam, right? It's just you. The study people you're with, they're not there no more. The tutor's not there. The professor's not there, and you got to get yourself hyped up because if you don't believe you're capable, it's just you've already drowned, right? So it's like I need to kick in, and be like, okay, let's go, right? All right. So should I unmute it?
Yes, I have a question about how to learn mathematics. Uh, about a decade ago, I didn't have what they call a website, watch it, practice another to give me some help when I struggle, right? And now when I have it, yes, I be able to learn from mistakes, all that. But um, I- after I take Cal 1 and Cal 2, I realize if I'm keep doing that, I'm not really getting the mathematics of it. Like, let's say if my calculus 1 final exam appear to me once again, I'm not so confident that I'll be able to do it with ease. So I guess my question is, let me put it in a metaphor. Like, I remember when my first time learned how to swim. Yeah, there are some buoyant device around me to help me at least swim along. But how do we make the right adjustment to kick those buoyancy device away so we be able to swim? Thank you.
I mean, I think that you're saying two different things. There's I made a mistake, and that's an opportunity to grow. How do I make sure that I understand what my thinking was that caused that mistake to happen? And then how do I change the coding or the error in thinking to make sure it never happens again? Right? So that's going to be you, really thinking about your approach and process to how you went about solving that math problem and getting a deep understanding of where that wrong thinking happened and then correcting that. And then I think the second thing that you're saying is if there's fear in your space because you made that error before, how do I make sure I eliminate that so it doesn't deter me from being confident next time I see something like that again? And so that's a different, in my mind, that's a different conversation. And we're definitely going to be covering a lot of lessons that deal with ways to eliminate and manage that fear. But there's a lot of things that you could do, and maybe for you it is trying to teach that concept, that math concept, to someone else that maybe doesn't know it, right? You being able to put into words, what you did, and being challenged by someone else who maybe doesn't know it, that says, well, no, that doesn't make sense to me, so you have to dig a little deeper into yourself to create maybe another metaphor or another approach. But that's one way that you can begin to have more confidence in your ability, because it's just not you convincing yourself, but you actually have to teach and convince somebody else that you really know what you're talking about. And then when they do find potentially a gap in your knowledge or a mistake or error in your thinking, then that's a win for you, because now you have a way to identify something that you probably would have not seen before. You would have moved on to the next thing. And now you're like, oh, wow. And again, we have to make sure that our relationship to failure or that is healthy. Like, failure really is an opportunity to grow. And if you have negative or wrong thinking and it gets identified, in my mind, that's winning. Because if I didn't know that ahead of time, right, I'd rather figure that out before the exam than during the exam or afterwards and being like, damn, that sucks. because now I'm missing those points, and I want those points. All right, anybody else have any comments or thoughts? Go ahead.
So, how do you know when you've mastered a concept? Like, sometimes you think you got the concept down and you feel like you have it on a deep level, but then on the exam, like, a question comes from a blind spot where you didn't fully understand the concepts to level to answer that question. How do you make sure that you cover all the blind spots so that you're prepared on the exam to answer any questions regarding the concept?
I mean, that's a really good question, Johnson, and I would say in general, the way that students of science, that you guys are going to identify those is just by doing problems and doing different problems, right? So one of the things that I'll just mention is that, yes, most people are going to do the problems potentially in the back of the book that that the teacher assigns potentially, or they're going to find exams that the teacher, may even give to you from practice exams, to do. But I actually believe that when you, especially for the lower division courses where these things are standardized across the country, physics, chemistry, math, it's the same block of what they're saying for yet you need for the first semester of calculus, the second semester or physics, it's all standardized, is to actually do exams from professors that ask questions differently. Like, sometimes the difference between, especially in an exam where time is a factor, right? How much time you have is a factor, is how your ability to read a problem and understand what they're really saying, reorienting yourself in a way that you really understand what they're actually asking for, so then you can have clarity to your approach to actually solve it. But when you were spinning your mind because you're like, well, what is this person asking for, and what does this mean, right? Like so doing problems that are different from different professors from all across the nation, because again, these, there's different exams. You can just look up, biology 1 exam and have a whole bunch of different sites in other universities that have people who have exams. Like, that's a look. So all I have to say is there's that piece, and then I'll just also say that when you're able to, if you have something that's a process that has steps, so if this is step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you're able to solve this problem and get to the end, can you take the solution and can you work backwards and understand every single step back to the beginning? And do you understand every single step and the why 1 is connected to 2 and 2 connected to 3 for every single step as well too? Versus moving into plugging and chugging and just inserting and making sure your units line up. You're just saying, what's the given? And you're just plugging and chugging things in there. Like, you really don't know why you're doing it. You're just kind of doing it. And then you're like, and you flip to the back of the book like, ooh, that's the right answer. I'm good. Like, no, you ain't good. Unless you could actually do all these things, right? So it's just finding ways to stress test yourself. Right, Gerald?
Oh, yeah. So I just want to ask something very, very quickly on that point, at least for math in particular, okay? So in math, that's my specialty. Math split into 2 parts, and for some reason, well, I know the reason, a lot of times, students are very good at one of the aspects, which is the algebraic manipulation of calculus, right? People love taking derivatives, people love taking integral, people love just doing these things, right? But don't mistake pattern recognition, which is basically what derivatives are. There are rules, pattern recognition, know how to manipulate variables. Don't confuse that with conceptual understanding. Dr. Moore says this all the time. He says, hey, you want to know if you really understand something in math? Do a word problem. And that is actually very, very important. So again, how I study math, I break it into 2 pieces. The computational piece. That's what I learn first, because that's the easiest that comes to me. So once I know how to take a derivative very easily, I can do it in my sleep, then I say, okay, do I really understand this? Bam, I start going to the word problems. And once I realize, okay, hold on, these words aren't making sense. And I don't understand what the hell I'm doing. I know how to do it computationally, but I do not know what it means conceptually. Once you bridge those gaps, I promise you math becomes super simple.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
So the plugging and chugging you were talking about, that's an example of pattern recognition?
Yeah, there's no conceptual understanding of just, you know, like even having a formula and asking yourself, why does this formula even make sense? Like, what do these symbols actually mean? Right? Like taking that extra minute or 2 or 5 minutes to do that, you know, is another level of conceptually understanding something. All right, so just really quickly, question 1. At the end of the day, everything comes down, in my mind, to energy, right? How much energy do you have to do a task or do the things that you feel like you want to do? So question 1 is that if you have 10 units of energy to solve a problem, how would you distribute that energy in regards to memory, patterns, or conceptualization? Right, so the folks that are in virtual land, if you don't have the book in front of you, this information should also be on the MESA website underneath that lesson. But if it comes down to memorization, pattern, or concept, how are you going to distribute those 10 units? Are you going to do 3 units memorization, 3 units pattern, 4 units conceptualization? Like, how are you in your mind, as you're trying to intake information and get to a state of mastery, how are you going to, you know, place your energy to get to that place? And there's no right or wrong, right? This is just how you're going about and approaching, you know, your learning. Go ahead, Justin.
So I would go about this depending on the type of subject and like what chapter you're covering. So like for example, biology, it's intensively heavy on memorizing and conceptualizing concepts. So I would personally do like 600 or for biology, 5 on conceptualizing and 5 on memorizing. And then there's not as many patterns because there's not as many like problem solving in biology. Maybe I would have both.
I was gonna say, in my opinion, go ahead.
Yeah, but it really depends on the subject. Alchem may be different. Calculus may be different. Calculus obviously has more like I'll put more into the patterns and conceptualizing, but that also depends on the chapter that you're covering. But yeah, that's just how I would do it.
All right, what are you thinking? Oh, no, you?
I just have a.
No, her. Then we'll go back. Sorry.
Organic subject?
Yeah.
I guess for chemistry, I usually put most of my energy into pattern recognition and figuring out what's the given and what I should plug and chug.
So what number?
Like 5, and then memorization like 3, and then conceptualization 2.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
I was just thinking a general balanced approach. So I have 3 memorization, 3 patterns, and then 4 conceptualization.
Okay. So this exercise is really so you can kind of gain awareness of how you go about intaking information. And again, there's no right or wrong. I probably would say that if it's me in general, I'm probably going 2, 2, 6 or 8, 1, 1. Like for me, it's always about the concepts. I don't like memorizing stuff. If I'm memorizing something and I don't have a way of applying it in my mind to something else, I'm like, so why am I memorizing this again? And my mind's probably going to purge it at some point because it's going to be like, I just hate memorizing stuff that I have no context for. I feel like it's wasting, my time. But again, like Johnson's saying in biology, I know that there's certain things I have to memorize or I can't do the problem. Right? So then I know I have to switch over and change this up and create flashcards and do other things that are allowing me to just know the information so I can do the problem. But I'm always gonna, in my mind, I'm gonna put more weight on this because that's my ability to create with it. But again, everyone's different, and there's no right or wrong. It's you understanding what your approach is. All right, so you should be changing this up depending on the subject area. So we talked about, especially in the lesson on engaging your relationship to learning, that the information that you're learning in calculus, which is quantitative, somewhat conceptual, and some memorization, is going to be a lot different than physics. That's going to be highly quantitative, highly conceptual, with a little bit of memory, because you can deduce and deduct things. That's going to be different than general chemistry. That's going to be different than organic chemistry. That's going to be different biology, right? So what I'm suggesting is you should have a core way that you go about mastering information, period, but it should be able to be adjusted based on the concepts and the content of the different courses that you may be taking, if that makes any sense. All right, any questions from virtual land? All right, so how does pressure and time constraints change the numbers? Because it does a lot with most folks. I always say that there's a balance that everybody is working on between surface level understanding and deep level understanding. Surface level, you're going to automatically switch to, I'm going to memorize the hell out of this because I only have a little bit of time left and hope that I see something similar and try to regurgitate that bug. Right? But deep level is, I'm going to focus on these concepts and make sure I have a relationship to it so I can actually, work with it. So scenario 1B, you have 2 hours to finish studying for a general chemistry exam taking place the next day, and you have covered 75% of the material to be on the exam. If your primary mode to learn is through conceptualization, do you maintain that same level of learning, or do you shift to memorization? What changes would you make to make sure you were good? Now again, there's time constraints. We all have time constraints. No one has unlimited amount of time. And you got 75% of it down, you're like, boom, I'm good. But you still got that 25% left, and you got 2 hours. Talk to me. What you thinking, Jessica?
It would still be better to focus on deep level understanding, because you might not see something that you're memorizing and you can connect it to columns that you will see.
All right, so she's saying she would focus on deep. Now, with those 2 hours, with the deep, maybe you can maybe understand another 10%. Right? I'm just throwing a little wrench in the scenario because we ain't got nothing better to do, right? So you're at least 85% deep concept. Is that okay? You feel good about that? All right, she says yes. All right, hold on, Jocelyn. Anybody in virtual land real quick?
So for exams and stuff, when I reach a point where it's like, okay, I've answered everything I know, and now here's the leftover, that's when I really rely on pattern recognition for me. And then if it makes sense and it fits the pattern and I can kind of like, if there's a 60% belief in it, I'm going to be like, okay, this is just what I have. So yeah, that's kind of where I default at when I reach my limits, and I'm like, okay, where's the pattern? What can I recognize? And do I trust that I know the pattern enough to plug in the concepts that are in this problem?
Okay, all right. Now, I know there's some people in this room that are gonna go straight to memorization with those last 2 hours. You know, not you or not you or you or you, but there's other people in this room that will. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, because it may or may not allow you to be successful, right? So, but this is what I want you guys to think about. And again, there's no judgment on it, right? I'm just talking about, like, for me, I think I'm rolling with Jessica. I want this 85%. If I have 85% solid, rock solid, then I can jigger my way to 90, in the 90 range, right? But if I know that I have 85% of that exam, like, done, because what happens is that you guys get, I view science as, you know, and the mysteries of the physical and life sciences as this huge ocean of information that you guys are being thrown into. It's a huge ocean. You guys get parachuted into the ocean, boom, and you're like, okay, I gotta learn how to tread water, but everything around me is information and concepts, right? And so in my mind, I need pillars. I need pillars of information that I can rest on. So if I know in physics that E equals mc squared, or force equals mass times deceleration, if I have that pillar down, then I can at least hold this pillar and be treading water and be like, how can I get there? My destination is to get there, right? Then I can be like, okay, I can get to this other pillar and I can work my way to that answer, because I have things in my mind that are concrete, that I believe I understand at a deep level. But if I don't, then I'm just floating around, right? I'm in this raft and I'm floating around, and there's a wind, and the wind carry me over here. I'm like, okay, but I'm over here, but I'm good. And I don't have things that are going to give me that confidence that I need to, like, be like, I got this, and I know for sure this is the right answer. So that's what I look for when I'm actually, to answer your question, Johnson, about the mastery. I'm creating pillars in my mind, right? And when I have that pillar there, and I've stress tested that pillar, and the foundation is strong, and I know it can sustain a 7.8.4 earthquake, I'm like, boom, let's go, right? Because again, on that exam, it's just me. Tutor gone, professor gone, people I'm studying with are gone. I need a pillar, bro. But you have to do what's right for you to gain confidence in yourself, right? You have to do what's right for you to learn how to gain mastery of your mind, right? Of that brilliant mind that you have. You have to learn how to turn it on fully. You have to learn how to master those concepts and this thinking and have clarity with it. And because big picture is, it's never going to come down to how far you go in life with how well you did on an exam at some point along the way. It's going to be like, do you really understand this stuff? And can I create with it later? Right? It's not no gold star. I got to nail this exam. I'm good, right? It's like, okay, that's a moment in time, and you kind of guessed, and like you never really learned it, and you can't do nothing with it else afterwards. I'm talking smack, but I do that sometimes. All right, so on page 20, this is what it comes down to, this figure right here. How can one consciously facilitate his or her own learning? So at the very left, we have the input. We talked about inputting the information, receiving the information, either it be memorization, pattern recognition, or conceptualization. At the very top, when you question, we're going back to that quote that we had at the very beginning, when you question the person who's actually trying to deliver information, understand it from their perspective, and you're questioning what you, the concept you believe you understand, that is an active process, right? That is an active process. So from there, you either can, at the very top gray box, create your own logic while integrating the new information to existing information. Anytime you create your own logic, that's like winning. Especially if the relationship makes sense and is solid thinking, right? In your own way. But the middle box is understanding other people's logic and integrating it. So you don't always have to come up with new ways of thinking on your own. But if you really understand someone else's thinking and their logic and you can make it yours, that's winning too. But it's that bottom box. When you believe information in a passive way that someone gave you, without really questioning it. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, because sometimes, if you question everything, then it may stop the flow of you being able to get to something in a reasonable amount of time. But if you don't question nothing, then, you're putting a whole lot of trust in the person in front of you, and they may not be accurate with the information that they know, or they may not be delivering the information in a way that really fits with your way of thinking. So you're spinning your wheels trying to understand someone else's approach and process, but it's not really how your mind thinks. So you have to take the extra step, right? So when you believe the information, it could go to the bottom gray box. You memorize information and you try to make the connections later. I'm not saying you're forced into that option, but it kind of it kind of pigeon-toeing you a little bit, or it could be understanding somebody else's logic and doing that conceptual integration. But at the end of the day, our goal is to be the gray top box and middle box, not the bottom box. The bottom box is not going to allow you to create with that information or concepts later on and build with it. Because again, like Webster, all you know is that the one way that you were shown, and instead of the infinite ways you can use that to build. All right, anybody have any thoughts or comments around anything that I've said thus far? All right, because I'm just that clear. You're like fronting right now, but it's okay. All right, process problems. Let me have DeJuan, go ahead and read page 21, that very first part for the process problem.
You feel an adequate amount of time covering the material to be learned, and you have completed all the homework problems. There's a challenging problem that is difficult to understand. You must complete 6 steps to answer the problem. You go to a tutor to seek advice on how to correctly solve the problem. As the tutor assists you with solving the problem, you completely understand her logic and you memorize the steps she used to solve the problem. So you understand the answer to the problem if presented on an exam as what is depicted below.
So, this example, even though it is somewhat abstract, I think you guys can feel me. And I'm just giving you guys a heads up. Like, this is going to happen. It's going to happen over and over again, especially when you get to upper division courses. Like, it's the cheat code, right? Like, it's going to happen a lot. Because usually what happens is this. You have those 1 or 2 problems in the homework set or the problem set that are just hard for people to understand, right? So you go to the tutor, you go to the professor's office hours, you're like, man, and they're like, oh, okay, and they help you understand or how they got the problem, and you're like, oh yeah, I got that. But it's their logic, right? And you really don't understand the concepts, but you just memorize every damn thing they tell you. Right? And you're like, man, if I see anything like this, I got it, because I have my photographic memory. You know what I'm saying? I got it locked in. Until you get a problem that is what I call the 2-step. Right? It's the 2-step twist. They're taking concepts and they want you to solve it out of order. So you really do have to understand why concept 1 and 2 go together, 2 to 3, 4, 5, and 6. You have to understand why. It's the why. And if you understand the why, then you will know in this problem, 4 should go right after 2. You're like, I've never seen this before? But I got to take this conceptual leap of faith. And that's what the professor is going to be challenging you to do. Because if it's all surface level, you can't take that leap. You'll be like, damn, I'm scared, right? It's nothing I've seen before. I'm scared. I don't know what to do. But if you actually understand it, you're like, you know what? This is the only thing that makes sense right now. I got to go in this direction because it's the only thing that makes sense based on the concepts that I know. Then you can make that leap and say, 2 goes to 4, 4 goes to 5, and then 5 should be connected to 3 so I can get to the end of this problem. That's going to be what you're going to be seeing moving forward. In biology, you're going to see that in biochemistry. They're going to take a pathway and they're going to disrupt some stuff. And you're going to be like, damn, I didn't know I conceptually think for biology. That's what you, Justin. But you get the point that I'm making is that, like, no, you know, they're going to split off to some pathways. And if you don't understand the patterns of how these pathways actually do what they do, then you're going to be like, well, I'm confused right now. And I'm going to say something to you really quick, Johnson, because this is funny. So there was a test I was taking at Berkeley, a biochemistry exam, and I remember for the final, I went on a whiteboard and I wrote out 15 different biochemical pathways. Like, that's so many pathways that they had taught us, and I went through and I wrote them all out. And then on the exam, they had a problem where they said, this is one step in one of these pathways. What is it familiar to another pathway you learned? I'm like, they went there. And I had to open up my mind and I had to just go through and I had to look at all those pathways and I was like, it's that one, right? And I got it right, but Johnson, I was like, why are you guys doing me like that? And the only way I was able to do that because I had wrote out all those pathways the night before in my mind, on the board, right? So like, nah, bro, like it's.
Like when you wrote on the whiteboard, this like it resonated with me because in my LCAM test, there's a practice exam, and like literally the exact same happened where they like twisted it around. And it's like they covered a portion of the content that I just wasn't prepared for. And so, yeah, it definitely like changes my strategy going forward to the next test. It's sometimes when we first start as students of science, we play the percentage game, and we believe that if I understand 90% of what's being covered, then I'm good. And I'm not saying that that percentage game, you know, isn't a good strategy or approach to master things, but there's certain classes and certain things that you have to understand it all. It's not a percentage game, especially in the classes that are highly conceptual like physics where the problem is 10, 15 steps. Any step that's wrong, the whole problem's wrong, period. You want all the points. So you got to be like, well, I understand, 12 of the 15 steps. No, you have to understand all 15. And I would also argue that if you don't understand a step, in my mind, it should bother you. Don't just let it go. Because part of the cheat code that I'm telling you about too is that as they have these classes upper division that are more competitive, that are graded on a curve potentially, right now, depending on how challenging your professor wants to be, you have 100 points on the exam. They may make 35% of the exam easy problems. They may make another 65% of the exam medium problems. That doesn't make sense. Okay, 55. 55.
and then only make 10% of the exam hard problems. So you just getting the easy ones and the medium ones right, you're already at 90%. And maybe the 10%, maybe you're able to knock out one of those, it gets you to 95, whatever. And these hard problems are going to be the problems that I just talked about, where most people are going to move to that memorization game and be like, I'm just going to memorize this because I just don't really understand the concepts, but if I see anything similar, I'm good, right? Until they have a professor that's like, you know what, nah, I'm going to go 20% easy. I'm going to go 40% medium, and I'm going to go another 40% hard. And that curve is like 60, 65. So you not understanding that 10% right here, you're done. But if you understand this 10%, you got it. Again, I'm just saying that's the game. Don't let that other 10% go. Don't let it go, because it's going to come back. It's going to come back. Talk to me.
So, I just have an open exam, and I just thought of like a new strategy that I would implement to prepare for our next one. And I just want to hear like your insights or your suggestions on it.
Mm-hmm.
So, before the exam, there's a practice exam that he gives us, and it's similar to what the exam would look like in terms of like how the questions, everything's formatted, but it's medium difficulty. And so during the exam, everything is like twisted and turned so into how it's like hard difficulty problems. And so I was thinking like I could like kind of look into the practice exam and try to twist the questions to like make it so I kind of try to find any holes that I might have, like that he might give me, to like cover the concepts and to really make sure that like if he does give me like harder questions, like he will give us harder questions, but just make sure that I have that box covered. What do you think of like that process?
I think it's a good approach. I mean, anytime you're actively thinking about the kind of questions that could be asked and the kind of more hard or challenging questions that could be asked, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Because you may see something like that and you may not, but you're still thinking, right? Not just memorizing, you're thinking. So yeah, I mean, I would also say find harder problems, right? Like it's the harder problems that force you or challenge you to elevate. Right? Like that's where you're growing. The easy problems, you know, like that should be like a given, right? You should be like, oh, man, they gonna throw this, right? Like, right? It's like, give me something that's gonna challenge me. Because at the end of the day, again, right now you may be thinking it's really about this grade in this class, and it's really about proving to this professor that I'm worthy enough, that I'm smart enough, that I have, you know, an A worth of, you know, effort. But at the end of the day, it's going to be like, no, where is your potential in life, and how can you take this to the next level that you're capable of? And you're only going to be able to find that by pushing your limits. So when I took OChem, again, I had someone in a special group that gave us harder problems and a harder exam before the real exam. But at some point, he was giving us graduate level problems. And he was giving them to me. I was like, why are you giving me these hard problems? He said, because you're capable of getting them right. I was like, okay, right? But a part of me was like, well, won't you leave me alone, right? And he was like, no, you're capable of getting it right, so I'm giving you harder problems, period. And even if those problems take you a long time to figure out, it just gives you that much more confidence when you're on that exam to be like, oh, nice, okay, right, okay, you're trying to flip, oh, I got this, right? Like it's just, so you just want that. And it's so again, what I love about Muhammad Ali, you know, the greatest, the GOAT, is when they asked him how many sit-ups you do or how many push-ups you do, he says, I don't know. And they're like, what do you mean you don't know? He says, I don't know because I don't start counting until it hurts. When it hurts is when I'm tearing down muscle and building new muscle. everything I did before it hurts don't mean anything to me. You could think about it the same way with your academics and these concepts. When you get to stuff that's more challenging, that's where you're building real muscle. And you want to be able to flex when you take that exam, and then, at the end, spin your paper around and be like, mark that mug an A. You know what I'm saying? I'm good. All right, any questions?
So you're saying, like, if the question is hard to the degree of how it would be an exam, it's good to practice those,
Yeah.
because you'll be able to kind of like go down a level and be able to apply the harder problems.
It's, yes. And what I'm also saying with organic chemistry is that the muscle of trying to understand, so this is the thing. There's 3 different ways that people process information. Some people are more auditorial, some people are more visual, some people are more kinesthetic. It's like, we kind of have more of a dominant one of those, but we can switch back and forth between those. I'm more kinesthetic, using my 5 senses, and visual. I can learn auditorial, but it's just, I have a low attention span and my mind will switch off and be like, why am I doing, this person's lecturing to me, I'm kind of good, right? But when I'm learning, I try to force my mind to move into the kinesthetic part. So when I'm taking organic chemistry or even physics, what I try to do is I shrink myself down to think like, what would I feel like if I'm that molecule? If I'm this molecule and I have a carbon here and I have a phosphate here and I have a bromine here, like I'm floating around in this acidic solution, I'm like, oh wow, it's hot in here. Okay, what part of me would want to come out in a hot solution and float away? Oh, it would be this phosphate, or it would be this bromine based on what it looks like. And when this positive charge opened up, I'm like, what's around me that's cold and sharp, that's going to attack it because it sees that I have this warmth coming from me. This is going to attack it in this way. So I'm sitting here in my mind thinking about all these things so I can have an intuition about how this molecule would want to act. Because once I have an intuitiveness, conceptual understanding of something, then I can lean on that for the rest of my life. And if the relationship is correct, I can create with it. So even if I'm studying physics and I'm looking at this circuit board and I'm like, okay, I'm this electron and this current going along this circuit board and I hit this capacitor, boom, it stops me, it's storing me, it's storing me, it's storing me, and then I shoot out and I hit this resistor, it's slowing me down, it's slowing me down, then I hit this transformer, it's amplifying me 2x, 4x. I'm thinking about all these things in my mind as I'm actually going through learning that mug, and again, it gives me intuitive understanding of that mug. So you feel me? There's levels to it, but you have to spend time making it your own. Any thoughts? Any comments? Go ahead.
Yeah, just one thing I just want to add to the whole, again, the idea of working out muscle, right? So again, he means that actually very literally, right? Like, if you go to the gym and say, you know what, to gain muscle, I'm going to lift 500 pounds. Now, if you can't lift 500 pounds, right, like you might hurt yourself. I see this happen at Berkeley, right? Yes, you do want to try harder problems, but obviously you want to make sure you build up to these harder problems, right? So again, you start with easy problems, make sure you understand the concepts. You go ahead and test your concept by trying a little harder, and then after a while, you know what? Let me go ahead and lift that 500 pounds. Let me go ahead and try that muscle out, see if it's strong enough. If it's not strong enough, that's when you can start finding the holes. And you go back down a level, keep trying, fix the holes, then you work up to the big thing, okay? Again, I see it in Berkeley a lot. People say, okay, well, if I do all the hard problems, I'll be good. But if you don't know where to start, and you've been staring at that hard problem for 10 hours, that's not building any muscle at all, right? The same way you go to a gym, and you can't lift that, you can't even do 1 rep. That's not gaining any muscle, okay? So just make sure you understand that give and take, okay? Because again, I see a lot of people try to do that. Like, well, be careful. It's in moderation. It's like real muscle, like really in the gym. Don't just lift things that are above your level without working up to that level.
Well, thank you. And you bring up a really good point. So that is a really good point. You don't start hard.
Yeah, I just want to add that for me, this is so accurate for my programming class, because if if I'm thrown something that I don't fully understand, like let's say my professor is lecturing and then he throws out this code, for me, I'm the type of person where I have to like practice it and conceptually understand it without just, typing up code and not understanding it all. So like if I'm throwing something that I don't understand, I'm like, okay, how did you get from point A to point B? And so I have to like manually get pen and paper and like solve the problem and like go through the steps. And I was thinking about when I took my midterm for my class and I like was freaking out, and then I was like, okay, no, let me calm down, let me take a break, and let me plan it out step by step what I'm gonna do, instead of just like trying to solve the problem and like trying to go, no, I have to break it down into smaller parts and then be like, okay, is my logic making sense? Can I manually solve this? Meaning like, do I conceptually understand what I'm doing, instead of just being like, oh, throw it out and not understanding anything.
And I like what you said in regards to, can I break this down into smaller parts that I understand and I can manage? That's a really good tactic. And, and that's what the 1 through 6 was. It really are these smaller parts that are linked together. All right, word problems. So you're solving a word problem in your general chemistry course. This happens all the time. You read through the word problem, you look to see what the information is given in the problem. Therefore, you know the formula, PV equals nRT. You're like, boom, I'm good. And then, you just start plugging and chugging until the professor gives you more given than you need. Right? If the professor gives you more given than you need, what do? How do you figure out what you need to solve the problem? Because now you're confused, and what do? Talk to me, y'all.
So, like, how I would go about this is look at like the question, and then look for any like key words that can kind of hint to you what the question is asking for. Like circle those or a big annotation so that you know to focus on those. And then from questions and what you annotated, try to make sense of, in your own way, of what the question is asking for and how you might be able to start working towards it, or maybe even work backwards to find the answer.
Okay. Go ahead.
And probably just make a solution map and then see what doesn't fit into it.
Say it again.
Make a solution map and then see what doesn't fit into it.
Is that a concept map? What's the solution map?
Just like from giving a solution, I guess it's kind of a pattern thing. Does that make sense?
Maybe just give me more context. I'm not sure if I understand you.
So your question was, you're trying to find what doesn't fit or what you don't need for the problem, right?
You're trying to solve the problem, but they just gave you more information than you need to solve the problem.
Okay, so I was talking about what I would use to find out what I don't need for that problem, because then if I isolate what I do need to solve it,
Okay.
then I can go through the process of using a solution map to get to the solution.
Okay. Look for what you need. So this is very similar to, if I know what the solution is, what they're asking for, what bits of information do I know I need to get there? Right, I'm not going to look at the given. I'm going to be like, if I know that this is my final destination, then what do I feel like, what do I know I need? And if there's parts of the given that have to be manipulated or transformed or converted into something else, then at least you have what you stated, what you know you need. Can I take these things and get me to what these things that I know that I need? Is that another way of? Mm-hmm. All right. Anybody else in virtual land? So this is going to happen a lot too moving forward. After you get past lower division, upper division is going to be all given. They're going to give you a lot. And you're you're gonna be like, damn, why are they giving us all this information for? And some people are gonna start spinning themselves. They're gonna look at something they give and just start, oh, you know what, really quickly, I'm just gonna start converting stuff to other stuff because I've seen this converted to stuff before. Am I supposed to do it here? No. You don't went down that rabbit hole and wasted like 7 minutes. because what you just mentioned, Dewan, takes you taking a step back and thinking first and then looking to see what you have. Not just, I got a formula. Let me just start plugging some stuff in. It's a higher level of thinking. So, the reason why I bring up this word problem piece is that you, as much as you can, you want to start getting more comfortable with word problems. You want to get more comfortable with taking concepts in math, taking functions, maybe functions that are given, maybe functions you're creating to solve a physics problem, and starting to work with it and say, how does this get me to where I want to get to? And that leap, that conceptual leap, that muscle, when you start to really build it, you're going to start to realize that what you're capable of is way more than you ever thought. So, to answer your question, or not your question, to continue the conversation, Johnson, about organic chemistry. So I mentioned to you that I built models of every single reaction that I was learning when I first started learning. I just got the 3-dimensional set and I just built the models because the professor was like, some people are really good at seeing things in their mind. Other people, they only can see it more in 2D, but you don't have to see it in 3D. But you still have to be able to understand the relationship between what's forward, what's backwards, and whatnot, the things you want to create. But I just went ahead and create these models, and I just spin the models, and I would look at them. I would use my kinesthetic and touch and feel them. And when I first started organic chemistry, I couldn't hold a molecule in my mind for longer than like 2 seconds. Like I try to see it, and then it would disintegrate. But by the time I finished the first semester of chem, I could hold a complex model in my mind. I could turn it around, right? Like I had built that muscle. But by the time I finished the second semester of chem, put it this way. This is real life, right? I'm taking the OChem final. Some people at Berkeley are ghetto smart. I'm gonna call them ghetto smart. 3-hour final, 2 hours into the final, someone pulled the fire alarm. They pulled the fire alarm, everybody had to put their papers down, they had to exit, and the fire truck came, and they went in there and snatched the final of somebody that they knew was getting an A, and called their mother. We were outside waiting for the fire truck.
By the way, that happens more often than you think. It happened to me too, also in Berkeley, by the way. It happens.
But there was a problem on the exam where the starting material, they just give you the name of the starting material, but you didn't have the 2-dimensional structure of it, right? So if you didn't actually write out what the starting material was correct, the problem was wrong, period. And I was sitting there, I was like, I don't know what the starting material is, right? So I was sitting there, I was trying to draw it, I was like, but I wasn't 100% sure. But my boy Jerry, who was in the class with me, when we went outside, I was like, Jerry, I said, problem 12. He's like, what's up? I said, what's that starting material? I mean, I gotta do what I gotta do, right? And he's like, give me a piece of paper. And on the napkin, he was like, boom, 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 boom. And I was like, bet. I sat there and I was like, boom, in my mind, doom, doom, doom. This, then I'll put this in there. It was the nicest sentence. I did it all in my mind. And when it came back, I was like, boom, got it. I didn't even know I had the ability to do that, but it was over the course of time that I built that muscle. That's the point that I'm trying to say is that you guys have superpowers you don't even know you have, but you have to put the work in. Right? There's no cheating. Right? You can't go to the gym and watch somebody else work out and think it's going to make you healthy. No, it don't work that way. You got to do the reps yourself. But the exciting part is that as you unlock your mind, you're going to be like, oh my goodness, there's so much more I can do because I spent the time and put the work in. Does that make sense? But you got to put the work in. All right. Anybody have any thoughts or comments on the virtual side? All right, so, oh, go ahead.
Just a comment. I was thinking about all these, and is there a danger between quotes that we are in a place like City College, San Francisco, where the classes might be easier than in a more demanding school like UC Berkeley? How do we prepare? How we do? Do we push ourselves harder to be prepared for a school such as UC Berkeley that I know is going to be more demanding? Right, we're spending a lot of time here in this school, but we need to be careful that we don't get too cozy, perhaps, with maybe somewhat easier classes.
You bring up a really good question, and what I would say is, you don't have to worry about that much here. The nickname for City College is they call it the Harvard on the Hill. And what you do have, especially in the Bay Area, is a lot of faculty that have PhDs from Berkeley, CCSF, and Stanford in this area, and their focus at the community college is only to teach. They don't have to do research. They don't have to do any of those things. Maybe they're on some kind of little committee here and there, but in general, you're going to get better teaching here because that's all they do is teach. And I would say sufficiently, they're going to challenge you here. I'm not saying every single professor, but I'm going to say as a whole. But sometimes that shift that happens because you have the weeder courses. You have the first calculus course, you have general chemistry, you have organic, you have physics, you have these weeder courses that start to challenge you to think conceptually, kind of like how we've been talking about today. So you getting through those courses in a way that allow you to excel, you're still working that muscle. When you get to upper division, everybody, including the students at Berkeley, have to be able to fend for themselves because they have that muscle built up, right? Because you're going to have students at some of these institutions that went to a private high school, that the first year and a half or 2 years of college is all stuff they've seen before. I'm just keeping it real. Right? Like in my mind, I wasn't a salutatorian, I wasn't a valedictorian, and in high school I was a ghettotorian, you know what I'm saying? But I had fun doing it. But when we got to upper division, I'm like, oh, let's go. Because everything is new to everybody. And I'm just gonna outthink you. But that's the confidence that I learned from putting that work in at the community college. Because that's why I'm challenging you guys to think that way now. You'll be prepared if you think that way now. But if you don't, and you double down on the things that have worked for you in high school, or you believe that's going to work for you later, you may get your feelings hurt. Does that make sense? Any other thoughts or comments or questions? All right, so for the homework assignment, and it's not like a homework assignment, but it's a homework assignment if you choose to, is you can choose a word problem for you, Johnson, and rewrite it where you're solving for another variable, right? And just be like, can I do this? And that's kind of part of in my mind, as I'm learning something, if I ever get to a state where I can start to dream about it at night, and my mind is just thinking about it in that way, where it's trying to make its own unique connections, that's like winning, right? Like when I was taking physics, especially the physics 4 CD class at Berkeley, I was dreaming about, things traveling at the speed of light in this reference frame and that reference frame. And I was waking up, writing down these problems, and I would bring them out to my study group. I'm like, can you guys do this problem? Like, where'd you get this problem from? I'm like, I made it up. They're like, for real? He's like, do you know the answer? I was like, no, but I'm sure we could figure it out. And let's go. And that allows you then to have a different conversation and even going to a professor about a problem where it's not like I'm flipping to the back of the book and I'm being validated by the book telling me this is the right answer, but I'm actually trying to find ways to prove to myself it's the right answer, and then I can find ways to double check it, right? Like it's a different muscle, right? And it allows you to have a different level of confidence, because you're like, I have these tools and I'm working with what I know and what I got, and I know I can get to the end. Again, you're going to mature as students of science as you take more challenging courses, and you're going to be forced to pass them and to be successful. But my job, or our job, is to make sure we increase that at a faster rate, so then you can get the grades that you believe and know that you're capable of, and build that muscle up, so when it's time for you to transfer, you know, you're like, let's go, versus I'm scared and I don't want to get my feelings hurt. All right, so thank you. You guys have a great weekend.